Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live presentation of Sumer Daily. I'm joined by fresh off the Wicked Gladiator 2 back-to-back movie presentation, followed by the Justin Herbert versus Lamar Jackson extremely fun presentation. Shawn Syed of the Stats and Scheme podcast. Shawn, how you doing, brother?
Sam, I'm doing really well. I feel like we go into the hardball. We have to compare it to Gladiator 2 and Wicked. It's important to compare. I obviously don't think you have to compare the art, but it felt like there was just beautiful storylines in these movies. There's beautiful storylines on the field, even between Lamar and Herbert. It felt like you get a tale of two different artists on the field there.
Yeah, it was certainly a fun game. I have yet to see the lovely stylings of Wicked, nor Gladiator 1 or Gladiator 2 for that matter. So I'm coming into it blind for that, but something I'm not coming into blind is this game. We've talked so much about Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert and both of the Harbaughs as coaches this year because they're two of the premier teams in the AFC. Coming into this game, Shawn, what did you really expect?
I think that I was expecting maybe a little bit closer game. I certainly felt like it was a time for the Ravens to just continue to get things going on offense. I thought that the Chargers offense overall would be able to push the Ravens defense a little bit more. I think the Ravens defense is really built through the spine at that interior defensive line. Of course, the linebackers in at safety spot. Roquan Smith being out, that I thought was a big thing going into this game where the Ravens have had some issues covering that middle of the field in the passing game just at different times and have not able to produce just a ton of pressure from the edge spot. So, I thought maybe Los Angeles' offense, I thought maybe Sam might have a little bit high on their supply there, just thinking that, Herbert could really carry them through. Of course, Ladd McConkey able to push them through in different ways. I thought early on in this game, we kind of saw it that, the Chargers run game where we think of this just Harbaugh team, this Harbaugh ethos, this Harbaugh offense, obviously with Greg Roman, their running game, it just wasn't that successful in this one. And I felt like when you felt that sort of early on, you make a few rough punt decisions, then things just moving so well for the Ravens.
Yeah, and I think talking about haters and appreciators here, like me and Lindsay talked about last night, that it feels like there's only a certain number of teams who really feel elite. And I really wasn't even including the Ravens in that group coming off their last two games where the defense did not look great against the Bengals, and then they weren't able to pull it out against the Steelers, who I thought were a substantially less talented team, and then kind of showed that in their game against the Browns, snow notwithstanding, whatever. And I thought the Chargers had shown that they probably were at least close to that tier. And it just seems as if they didn't have the talent, which I really didn't expect coming out of this game. I liked the progression of Ladd McConkey. I'd like the progression, obviously, of Herbert and the two tackles. And I thought the defense was pretty good. And the Ravens were just kind of able to tear it apart. Now, I will note, for most of this game, it was extremely competitive. And there was what we like to call ethical ball. Like, they were just playing hard. The players were playing good. When there were negative plays, it was because it was a good play by a player. Unfortunately, there were a lot of penalties, and that's kind of what broke it down at the end. A couple of key drops and some penalties, Shawn.
Sam, we had some well-sourced, ethically sourced grass-fed football out there. And it really was beautiful for a lot of it. I thought, like the Chargers run defense, obviously, Derrick Henry ends up over 100 yards and end up having just a positive day rushing, where I think the Ravens had like a 96 percentile on the ground. So the Chargers, obviously, they want to fit the run from a light box. That's what they want to do. And you hear Troy Aikman on the broadcast, which to me, it felt like a direct note from their pre-production meetings, where he says, they're going to bank on being able to stop you in the red zone. Well, the problem is that when you have Lamar Jackson able to make just play after play, and then you get his beautiful rushing touchdown where he has that back juke just like he did in high school. I think it's just so tough to deal with this team because you have to put heavier bodies on the field to deal with some of their heavier looks. But then you also have to be fast enough to deal with Lamar Jackson. Oh, also Derrick Henry is just going to run straight at you and go through your face. It's a really, really difficult offense to deal with in so many different ways. I do think that the offense a little bit earlier on in the first half just felt like, some things just off in the pass game, whether it's, a little bit of a pass rush is able to move Lamar off the spot or able to speed him through the progressions a bit, or just, ball hits a receiver and it ends up as a drop. I think that Lamar has played so well this season. It's still just in the pass game. I think there are times again where you just want more earlier on. They still score so many touchdowns in a row in this game. So you feel positive about the offense overall. And then for the Chargers defense, you start to think a little bit, right, about just some of the teams that they've played. Obviously, their style of play is going to be, like I mentioned, that light box. How often can you maintain that? And you're not going to have to play against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson and this team every single week. You're not going to face power that many times on just a regular basis. So going forward, you just have to think like they're obviously trying to literally build a program just like Harbaugh did in college. You just want to maybe see a little bit more from a few different spots where on the outside, I think you can just attack the Chargers. And if you can get big enough inside to where, no one loves Poona Ford more than I love Poona Ford, but you're able to get some rushing yards kind of straight down the middle, especially as the game goes on. I think that's just a little bit of a tough matchup for this Chargers defense.
Yeah, and speaking of those matchups, Matt chimes in. He says he's so unbelievably hyped for Eagles at Ravens next week. I absolutely am. And what I'm the most hyped about, Shawn, is that we saw the aggressiveness of the Ravens on fourth down. And I noted, like, hey, Jim and John are brothers. Is Jim going to match John's freak tonight? John Harbaugh, it was clear that early on in the game, I'm assuming this was a decision that they made maybe at the early part of the week, that if they were close and it was time to go for it on fourth, they were doing it. I don't know if they saw something on film. We saw some, gap scheme runs. They were really trying to fill it up with Derrick Henry. But Eagles at Ravens next week, I think we can expect a lot of fourth downs coming into play, particularly given the kind of mirror image of Henry and Jackson and then Hurts and Saquon on that flip side. Is that what you're kind of thinking for next week, that it may come down to some situations like that?
I mean, I hope so. I'm really excited for that game. I do think that the Ravens go into that game as fairly comfortable favorites, particularly after this win where the Eagles are, look, they're off 7 straight wins. We all saw them on Sunday night, really able to handle the Rams, able to run over them, able to just take care of business at both lines of scrimmage. So I think that when the Ravens are running power just like straight at the Eagles defense, that's going to be a lot of fun because Vic Fangio, he wants to play 4 down. He wants to play nickel. He's happy to have Cooper DeJean bump into the box. He's going to roll a safety down. That's, the way that he wants to play. He's going to move Zach Bond, our guy, down to build it that 5 down front. He's going to blitz Nakobe Dean kind of through the B gap, just building different looks up front. And it's a real test for the Eagles because their linebackers have played fantastic this year, Sam. Way above anything I think anyone could have expected from these guys. So when you have the Ravens who, like I said, they're going to keep running power at you, right? They're just not going to stop doing that. You're also going to have to be able to deal with Lamar Jackson kind of around the edge. So I'm really excited to see that. I think that Lamar Jackson does a fantastic job throwing into open windows, throwing receivers open, extending plays to find open receivers. So I think that Quinyon Mitchell is going to get like a real test, I think, next week, where it just feels like people have like kind of ignored him, where they're just going to throw away to the other cornerback on the opposite side. And then I think for the Eagles offense, Sam, I just want to see, can you run on this front, right? Like you're continuing to run inside zone, you're continuing to run outside zone, you're moving into counter, you're going to get just a few different trap plays. The way that the Eagles rushing attack has looked this year has been so fun to watch because a lot of rushing offenses, like they want to test you at every single like gap on the offensive line. The Eagles and Saquon Barkley, one, they can open up every single gap, but Saquon can hit every single spot along the offensive line on any given play because his vision is so good. His agility is so good. He trusts his offensive line and is just a super cool combo. I think that that's just a game that I'm so looking forward to. And again, I do expect the Ravens to go into that game, of course, in Baltimore as favorites and, likely win that game. But I think it's a chance for the Eagles to say, hey, look, like we should be seeing exactly the same as the Detroit Lions are in the NFC.
Right. I think we love testing our assumptions over here at Sumer Sports. And even if it means we're wrong, we love football. So if it ends up in good football, we're okay with that. And you look at coming into this week, the Baltimore Ravens were second in EPA per rush on the defensive side of the ball. It's really the passing game that has really caused problems for them. And they have the talent in the passing game, particularly if Devontae Smith is going to be able to come back. A.J. Brown has been fantastic, had another 90-90 game, 90 percentile in terms of yards after the catch, 90 percentile in terms of route running, in terms of Sumer Sports advanced metrics. You can check out all of those for this week, being refreshed tomorrow for the Sunday games, now that we got the beautiful charting data in, being refreshed on Wednesday for the Monday games. on sumersports.com. Lots of great tables there for your analysis on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, betting, fantasy, etc., etc. I use them for all of my articles. So great spot to find some great information. But breaking it down there again, this was truly a game where we found out that the Chargers, just in terms of talent, were not in, tier one with the Lions, the Chiefs, and the Ravens. And I think that we will find out fairly quickly if the Eagles are in that talent sphere. I think they probably are, but it'll be very interesting to see how they match up, particularly on the back end, given that is what's a little scary for them, the edge position on defense and the back end. But what is not is the rushing quarterback, Jalen Hurts. And apparently Justin Herbert is just going to be a rushing quarterback now. I mean, touchdown from him again this week. He's certainly been unlocked. And it's kind of changed not only his demeanor, but also the way that teams have to approach him, I think, when they're playing. I think that, Zach Orr was kind of blitzing. It seemed to be that he was kind of blitzing a little bit more in this game to try to perhaps counteract, Herbert running a little bit all over the place. And I think it kind of started working down the stretch. But obviously looking forward to that matchup with two running quarterbacks. Let's review, Herbert and Jackson's excellent play in this game, Sean.
Sam, this image in my mind, like a late game, obviously, it's kind of out of reach at that point. You're down 14. You got to score and kick an onside kick, a low percentage play. I mean, Herbert's rolling out, he's scrambling, and he just jukes out Kyle Hamilton, who, as you know, is like one of my favorite players in the league. And to see Herbert do that so casually was phenomenal. Like, it is absurd how athletic he is. Just his profile of a player. Of course, that's the type of, like, player that is so easy to fall in love with just as a prospect, as a player on any given day, on any given play, where it feels like almost upsetting to see some of the drops that you get in this game. Of course, look, like, the Chargers came into this year and I think they have surprised me with their record, right? Like, they are on the plus side. They're playing with house money a little bit, but every time I see Herbert play, it makes me think, I wouldn't want to run into this team in the playoffs. I think Jesse Minder can really scheme up just an awesome game plan. I think that they can fit the run inside, even though the Ravens were able to have success here. And Herbert can just go nuclear. Like, he absolutely can. When we look at some of the advanced metrics in this game, yeah, they weren't perfect, but how many times is the ball going to hit a receiver in the hands and it's going to hit the ground? That's just not on him. Maybe you say, hey, Justin, if you could throw something other than like 100-mile-an-hour fastball, which he can, he really, really can. And even in this game where you get a bunch of flags kind of late in the game to sort of add on to that. But it's tough to look at this game and, look at some of the positives for Los Angeles, but Justin Herbert just fantastic. I magnificent, spectacular. I don't even know like what superior words to speak about that, because he does things that other quarterbacks just can't do. And Sam, we talk about this so often where, like, can you be a quarterback that just like snaps his finger and converts a third down, whether that's a throw, whether that's a tight window, whether that's extending in the pocket, whether that's avoiding a sack, whether that's avoiding a free rusher, where you're avoiding free rushers in this game where it feels like Herbert's not even looking there. Like what is happening where he is just like feeling rushers that are slowly getting there. So a bunch of really, really good clips just overall from this game and just like, on the end of season highlight reel for sure for Justin Herbert.
Right. It's an insane development. And it's funny, Sean, we watch so much football, but at the same time, we're probability guys at the end of the day. We're working really, really closely with the data scientists who look at these things on a spectrum. They're not looking at these things, first take style, just saying like, this is the way it's going to be. And so sometimes, it is a little surprising when something comes true. I'm going to highlight, Bryce Young playing really well the last 3 weeks. Like, that was surprising, even though I did see the makings of it early season. I'm still kind of shocked that this has occurred. Early on in the season, I was like banging the trash can, Astros fan. I like said that, words came out of my mouth, immediate freeze. Shouldn't have said that as an Astros fan. Nonetheless, I was like, this guy needs to be running. And it really feels like that's unlocked another element of their offense, man. Like, maybe it's given them, it's given them an upper hand. Maybe banging on the trash can gave the Astros a little bit of an upper hand. I can guarantee that running around a little bit has given the Chargers a little bit of an upper hand from Justin Herbert. Sean, we got Matt tagging back in with us. What are the takes going to be when the Chargers win in Houston in the wild card
Oh
round?
man.
You know,
Well,
we talked about this a little bit on Stats and Scheme. I have a little bit of a blurb coming out about CJ Stroud in Hot Sauce Hot Takes on Wednesday. Shawn, give us the early take pre this occurring.
I mean, I definitely worry about it, right? When I look at the Texans and just a little bit of a disappointment in their offense overall, where they've just, you get CJ Stroud in a bunch of these third and long situations, and you can't play superhero for every single third down, unfortunately. And Stroud has struggled at times this year, I think. Whereas last year, it's just like, man, this guy is pinpoint accurate on every single throw. There's just been times this year where he's been a little bit off, and that kind of piles on to a just rough run game, to some of the injuries that they've had on offense, where we looked at it as a team that really overachieved last year. And I think I was hoping for just like a big bump up, because I think Stroud is a superstar in this league. Like, I don't have long-term concerns about him, but certainly like in the more short term, I do worry about that Texans team, even with the defense that like those guys can really get after you. Like, that defensive line can win a game single-handedly. I guess the Stroud Herbert conversation, I think that will be a fun one. That it's two great quarterbacks. You get Nico Collins in that game. You get Ladd McConkey. You get receivers of different styles. Fun defenses, great defensive game plans. I hope that that's a matchup. I think that'll be a fun one, because I think the Texans are still going to win the division. I still think the Chargers are going to find a way to make the playoffs. So I think that'll be one that all of us, including Matt, is really looking forward to.
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting. Particularly, we've seen the DBs play very well for the Houston Texans. We've seen guys like Petrie make a splash. We've seen Jahad Ward played well. We've seen Derek Stingley play well. There's been a lot going on that's good in that back end, and that's really been the struggle, including in this game, of not being able to get on the same page as guys like Q Johnson, as guys like Josh Palmer. But someone who is very much on the same page as Justin Herbert right now is Ladd McConkey. Shawn, just excellent. Another great week. We've seen him be successful at route running, and we've seen him be successful after the catch as well any given week. This was another pretty good week from him. Would you agree?
I think when you project him from college, just seeing his usage, you're really looking at just some of his routes and kind of not hoping fully. Obviously, you're building just like a prospect profile and saying, hey, like, he can clearly do this. He can do this, at different times along the draft process. I mean, I think he's kind of overachieving for what just his draft profile was overall. Obviously, you pick him relatively early. I think a lot of Chargers fans certainly would have maybe liked to have Malik Neighbors there. Sam, I don't know if you're like, I keep on ping ponging back and forth. Like, do you want to build the offensive line first? Obviously, you can't just choose like, hey, I'm going to pick a Hall of Fame right tackle. Like, I'm going to have a Hall of Fame wide receiver. Like, it's not that simple, but I kind of like some of these teams building through the offensive line just in that sort of way. It feels like it raises the floor. Now, I do think obviously having a star receiver can raise that ceiling just so much, but I think you hope that, where you have McConkey, you're building versatility where maybe, you make a move in free agency to bring in a receiver so we don't have to see Justin Herbert throwing the ball just in beautiful ways that end up in a few drops in this game.
Yeah, and as Matt's tuning back in with us is asking how many teams are kicking themselves for not hiring Harbaugh this season, it's interesting to note that they did build through the draft in terms of their tackle position, and there will be some great wide receivers on the market this year. I love T. Higgins. I thought he's played excellently when healthy, obviously, this year. I think you're probably going to be able to get him in that 10% of the cap range that you got Devontae Smith or that you got Nico Collins. Maybe it'll be a little bit of a bump just because he'll be on the open market. Maybe that's something for the Chargers. But like tuning back into Jim Harbaugh, obviously, it's really difficult to get tackles, not in the draft at the level that Rashawn Slater are and a Joe Alt is. It's really tough to gauge. I think there's so many things in terms of the coaches at any given point in time of like, letting go of one coach. How much does the quarterback matter? Like, I think it definitely played a fact that Jim Harbaugh was moving from a team where he was coaching JJ McCarthy and then slots into another, 1A level player at the next level in terms of Justin Herbert. I don't know how many jobs Jim Harbaugh would have taken if that wouldn't have been available. So, who knows about Jim Harbaugh in that space for everyone else, who may or may not have been courting him. But I think it's a perfect fit for the Chargers, and agree with Timothy here. Happy for Ladd. Chargers definitely do still need a true deep threat. What were you kind of seeing, Shawn, on those deep routes? I think there were good throws from Herbert parts of the game. I think there were miscommunications. When you try to see those elements where it just looks like they're not on the same page, what are you trying to look for to identify whose quote unquote fault it was?
It's always so hard on the TV copy. I think that's why I really like the Thursday night broadcast, where you have the option to go to that sort of all 22 look. I think a lot of times you're kind of feeling out the spacing for things overall, whether it's, hey, are there like too many people in this spot, or just kind of how the defense is reacting, like the overall kind of shape of the defense, because that, like from the well, as the ball's going down the field, you can feel like, hey, this is cover 3, like this is cover 4, this is probably man, like they're in 2-man here, like this may be where the ball should have gone, or you're kind of hoping that the broadcast just does a good job on replay. Sometimes they really help you out. Sometimes they don't. I think the best broadcasters do a really good job of getting to it pretty quick, and not just be like, oh, this guy was wide open, but hopefully showing you kind of on the broadcast. But that's probably like the first thing that I'll look back to on all 22 tomorrow morning, just seeing, are these good shots? Are these bad shots? Are these shots that there really was no one else? Because when you think of like quarterbacks are going to be pressured, right? You're guaranteed to be pressured in this league. You have the options. Are you going to throw the ball away? Are you going to take a sack? Are you going to scramble? Or are you going to throw the ball to a receiver into a tight window sometimes? So I think that then you can isolate kind of the receiver route level. And that's actually one of the reasons why I really like some of the computer vision metrics we have at Sumer that we talked about on the Stats and Scheme podcast, just looking at, like, I can watch a receiver run route and feel like, okay, this was a good route. Like, this was a bad route. This was a route that, maybe you'd want back. I do think the computer vision, the tracking metrics sometimes do an even better job just showing, like, at particular, like, frames of the route, like on this specific step, it is having this specific influence on the cornerback. And you can kind of match that with your eyes on film, just feeling like, hey, the receiver maybe could influence the cornerback just a little bit more on this step. So, I mean, like, receiver versus corner battles are so fun, particularly when you have defenses in this game where they're, from similar trees, where they're going to play a lot of zone, but they're going to match you in specific ways. They're going to try and take away the best thing that you can do and really kind of force you to check the ball down underneath. But then you have Justin Herbert, who says, yeah, I'll just throw the ball over you.
Yeah, and once again, want to plug me and Shawn will be back on the Stats and Scheme podcast on Tuesday. I am filling in for Tej, who is, doing the Lord's work, staying up late in India for a lovely Chargers Ravens game. Our boy Tej can't miss some lovely football, even when he is halfway around the world. And speaking about lovely football that people would enjoy halfway around the world, Shawn, as we close it out here, what was your favorite part from this football weekend?
Oh, I mean, this is the Eagles' offensive line. Like, this is so easy for me. Where, Sam, I think we're just getting back into the establish the run era, which obviously both of us are going to be. Yeah, we understand that passing is more efficient. We understand you're not going to get to these.
Hey, like, man, I love the run. Don't get me wrong. I'm an old school football guy. I just happen to have algorithms in my head from time to time. Just from time to time.
Sometimes, you got to just move the numbers brain out. Like on film, it's like it is difficult for defenses, I think, to continually tackle and get through blocks and have like high quality block destruction over and over and over again. So I think that the offenses that are doing just like the best job, we saw the Ravens do it really well in this game against the Chargers. The Lions absolutely have the ability to do it too. But for the Eagles to do it on Sunday Night Football against a defensive line that, they weren't as good against the run from most of our metrics, but they were absolutely able to get after passers this year just in the pass rush. And Sam, I am talking all 5 of these guys on some of these double teams. Like, throwing guys at the club is a disservice, like, to what happened. Like, I'm watching Mekhi Becton just level people. Like, I'm seeing Landon Dickerson just remove people, just moving people outside of gaps. You, of course, have Mailata and Lane Johnson. And it makes me feel like, I mean, the MVP, like, why does it have to go to one person, Sam? It should go to 5 members of the Philadelphia Eagles and their offensive line coach, Jeff Stoutland, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, of course, Cam Jurgens, Mekhi Becton, and Jordan Mailata. Well, we can't split it 5 ways. We can't just like put it maybe in one locker in Philadelphia and just kind of give it all these guys.
Yeah, dude, give it to the big hogs. Those guys, they like to eat. Take them out to a lovely steak dinner. You're in Philly. There's a bunch of great places to go. Or Philly cheese, Philly cheese for life. Maybe we need to hook that up for this Philadelphia offensive lineman. You mentioned Mekhi Becton. Good highlight. Timothy also tags in, it's shocking how many teams misevaluated Lamar Jackson. I just think it's difficult, dude. Like, it's so hard at any position to evaluate some of these positions. And you highlighted Mekhi Becton. Like, Mekhi Becton had a ton of struggles at, those outside positions that he played. You throw him in at guard, he's so athletic, he's so big, and you put him in a scheme, obviously, a lot of power schemes, a lot of gap schemes coming from that Eagles offense. They're really trying to run the ball, and he's just like moving people out of the way. But it's so many factors, Shawn. You never know exactly how it will go at any point in time. But we are here for it. And that's why we come, on Mondays, late night, coming to you breaking down football because it's so fun to watch. It's so unpredictable. And today, you get a lovely Ravens game. And just as the cherry on top, you get a couple Derrick Henry stiff arms. Thank you for joining me, Shawn. Any last words?
Derrick Henry stiff arms. I'm glad you mentioned that. Just on that point on evaluation, like it's so hard. Like Becton's obviously a first round pick. Like it's been years since he was drafted there. Sometimes it just takes the right player to fall into the right situation, to go with the right coaches. There's just so many moving parts that have to happen sometimes for these players. The Jackson one is hilarious. Like just thinking back to some of the things that were said about him in the draft are so rough. And to just see like, man, this guy's about to get another MVP. So yeah, evaluating quarterbacks is really hard. Sam, I can't wait till, it's going to be draft season. You're going to be grinding film of these prospects. We're going to be going back and forth. We're going to be figuring out who is the next great quarterback.
Oh, it's going to be beautiful. So folks, always make sure after these lives to follow Sumer Sports on Twitter or YouTube, wherever you're watching us. Make sure to go to Shawn's lovely podcast, the Stats and Scheme podcast, where Tej Seth also tends to join him, and I hop in when Tej can't make it. Subscribe there, and then subscribe to the Sumer Daily podcast. And, ask us a couple questions. We're going into draft season. Maybe you want me and Shawn to start putting an early eye to some folks. Maybe you want us to, look forward to this lovely Wing T Dolphins versus Packers Thursday night football game. Like, we may see the Notre Dame box get popped out by either Matt LaFleur or Mike McDaniel at this point. It's going to be awesome. We're going into the late season. There's fantastic stuff coming out. Shawn, thanks again for joining me. He's Shawn Syed. I'm Sam Brookhouse. We are both signing off from Sumer Sports. Thank you so much for tuning in with us tonight.